Welcome home, brave heroes. I'm Ash, this is HeroQuest, and it is Monday, unfortunately, which means it is time once again, fortunately, for the long-form podcast-styled series, The Broadcast, where I, Ash, talk about all things HeroQuest dungeon crawler related. And today, I ask you, please disregard/forgive any strange visual artifacts or abnormalities you may notice, because I have decided to use a different camera. And I can't see myself. I have no preview at this time. I'm not even sure exactly which camera I'm supposed to be looking into. So forgive any uncanny valley as we delve into today's topic, which I hope that you will enjoy along with me. I will periodically sip my coffee, which has gone cold, and you will continue safely driving to or from work or school, dropping off, picking up kids, packages, doing some sparking, doing some Amazon delivery, whatever it is that you do. Please do it safely and let me know in the comments below if I did not cover your broadcast listening use case. I would like to know what it is that everybody does when they listen to this stuff bi-weekly. So without further ado, today's topic is Advanced HeroQuest. You know I had to talk about it at some point. Advanced HeroQuest is a board game produced by Games Workshop and not Milton Bradley. I wanted to step away to grab my copy of this now vintage, fine dungeon crawler. It has its fair share of lovers and its fair share of haters and pretty much everybody in between, because it is a modular dungeon crawling system with rules and theming and basically goal and gameplay that are very, very different from HeroQuest, as was, and as is now. So the question that I have seen arise time and time again, and the statement that I have seen arise time and time again since practically the beginning of the HeroQuest HasLab crowdfund campaign was, will they remake Advanced HeroQuest? And I think/hope Avalon Hill will remake Advanced HeroQuest. These are two phrases that continue to resurface to today. And this has been suggested to Avalon Hill directly. It has been conversation sparked in official Avalon Hill channels. And there has generally been a lot of back and forth about why this is possible, why this is not possible, why it's relevant, why it's not relevant, and basically just passionate fans debating, mostly civil, over this point. So this broadcast series is not really intended to be like a final word on anything. I am no authority. I am only an authority on the things that I want. I know what I want. I'm an authority on the way that I use the things that I acquire. I'm an authority on my perspective, but it doesn't mean that my perspective is the only right one. It doesn't mean that my opinion is the correct one. All opinions are subjective. Nobody has a correct opinion, unless it's something obvious, like dwarves are better than elves. Having said that, I do highly enjoy kind of pushing the conversation and narrative in a direction that I consider forward so that we can get to more authoritative takes, so that we can get to better, more informed opinions on why a thing should or should not be. In this case, I would like to talk about Advanced HeroQuest, what it was intended to be, and how it has been viewed for better or for worse. And Advanced HeroQuest was a 1990 board game completely separate and distinct from Milton Bradley's HeroQuest. In fact, Milton Bradley had nothing to do with the development. The cover art for the game was not painted by Les Edwards. The rule set is very miniature happy, and it is very much a product of its time, a time in which Games Workshop would sell you a board game in order to try to get you addicted to buying their minis, a product that would be more of an opportunity to show how minis could be used if only you had said minis. And wait, that's never stopped. Games Workshop has always been that way. Advanced HeroQuest is, on its face, on the tin, heroic roleplay in a world of magic and mayhem. And Games Workshop would go on to define further a lot of the concepts in Advanced HeroQuest fine-tune and tweak and improve them, many would agree, to create a rule set that would eventually become Warhammer Quest. Just Warhammer Quest, which many of us refer to as Warhammer Quest 95, because there have been a multitude of games with the title Warhammer Quest, and we just want to be extra sure that we know people understand we're talking about the 1995 original edition when we talk about it. Warhammer Quest is effectively the evolution of Advanced HeroQuest. But is Advanced HeroQuest the evolution of HeroQuest? So I think that this is a very fundamental question that you would have to ask yourself and have an answer to if you wanted to talk about whether or not Avalon Hill would, could, or should remake Advanced HeroQuest. And it's one of several fundamental questions that I'd like to go over. But this fundamental question kind of addresses whether or not you think it's a natural progression from one game to the other. It's kind of in the title, right? One's HeroQuest, one's Advanced HeroQuest. Is that not a progression? Are you not going from beginner, which is HeroQuest, to advanced, which is Advanced HeroQuest? There are some people who would say that that is the case, that, it expands on Milton Bradley's HeroQuest, and it does, because it does have optional rules that allow you to take the miniatures and the furniture from HeroQuest. And it's very clear to specify that you don't need original HeroQuest. You don't need what they call in the box Milton Bradley's HeroQuest to play Advanced HeroQuest. The two games are not sequential in any way. They're not related in terms of gameplay or campaign progression or anything like that. One is not the expansion to the other. It was not designed to be that. It was not intended to be that. Advanced HeroQuest does not expand HeroQuest in any rules as written way, but it does provide you with a way to utilize your HeroQuest miniatures. And I would say that Games Workshop demonstrably provides evidence as to why this is. It's because they want you to be able to utilize these miniatures in this game system. Now, Advanced HeroQuest was released in the UK, and it should have been available in US hobby shops around that time as well. It actually had two expansions. One was a gameplay expansion, Terror in the Dark, which was released in 1991, and there was a paint set expansion, which sounds very Games Workshop. I don't even know what to say about that one. I don't have it. I'm not sure if it exactly ticks all of my boxes for a thing that I have to have. I'm at a loss of words for that one. It's paints. If you manage to get it, let me know if the paints are still usable, if they're still wet, or if they can be reconstituted. Let me know if there's anything of value in such a box other than just dried up containers of paint. My goodness. But the Terror in the Dark expansion, that is a real expansion, and it's the only one released for Advanced HeroQuest. If you were to do a little bit of digging on the gameplay between the two games, if you don't have either one of them, they do play very differently. HeroQuest is, at its core, a dungeon crawler that maintains simplicity. It insists on simplicity. It does not want you consulting random number tables. It does not want you to have to figure up attack and defense past those two parameters into toughness and strength and ranged combat and movement and actions and the flow of combat and the evil dungeon master player rule set. They're all very simple. They're all very defined. They're all very consistent. There are some vagaries here and there, but those are just the things that we lovingly argue about throughout the years on the HeroQuest side. The vagaries don't make anything more complex. Advanced HeroQuest is not like this. If you have played or have heard of Warhammer Quest, it actually plays a lot like that, being essentially a spiritual precursor to it. It has wounds, which basically replace our body points, and that's of no concern, but it also has strength and hit and toughness, and there are a lot more stats on a card for a hero or a monster in this game than there are for HeroQuest. So to say that the components translate 100% is inaccurate. You would need to have some built-in rule set for those components. And we do have that. We do have that in Advanced HeroQuest. We have the ability to bring our enemies, monsters from the original HeroQuest game over, But I will also argue that while this makes HeroQuest nice to have, it's not for the benefit of selling more copies of HeroQuest. In fact, the named monsters that are on the character sheets, or the monster reference tables, actually, are not the models from the HeroQuest game, yet they share the exact same names. We have Zombie, we have Skeleton, but those are not the zombie and skeleton models available from HeroQuest. These are different models available at the time from Games Workshop to be bought for perhaps the Warhammer Fantasy Battles or Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay games. We've got a Mummy, we've got a Famir, both of those here and here, and again, they're not the sculpts from HeroQuest at all. These monsters are not in the quests as they are written for the game's campaign. Instead, we are given an onslaught of several different Skaven. Actually, we're given an onslaught of the same Skaven. We really don't have a lot of variation in Skaven for this game. We have one sculpt, and we have a shield that we are able to place. There are Skaven in this game, they are clan rats, and we have tokens that represent other Skaven, but Games Workshop are really encouraging and very supportive of you buying more Skaven sculpts, many more Skaven sculpts if you can afford it, because in this we have the Clan Skryre, White Skaven Sorcerer, the Clan Pestilence, Plague Censer Bearer, the Clan S'more Warlord, the Clan Pestilence Plague Monk, the Clan Eshin Assassin, Prasnagar, the Prince of Agony, the Warp Weaver, the Warp Thrower team, the Jezzail team, 7 other Skaven just on that one paper. It doesn't stop at Skaven. This goes fully into the Warhammer IP by telling you that we have stats for the Greater Daemon and Tzeentch. We have the Daemonette, the Chaos Lord, Undead Champion, Minotaur Lord, Sorcerer, Ogre Chieftain, Ogre War Chief. Not necessarily Warhammer monsters exclusively, but definitely monsters that are available in Warhammer, along with the Orc Warlord, Chaos Thug, Chaos Warrior, Chaos Champion, the Bloodthirster, which completely replaces our Gargoyle. The 64-page rulebook has 3 pages in it dedicated to the HeroQuest rules. Numbered 45, 46, and 47. We have HeroQuest characters. We have details to provide for the fireplace, the cupboard. We have tables that you can roll on should you wish to explore these. Search the weapons rack, roll a D12. D12s are not included in vanilla HeroQuest, but they are included with advanced HeroQuest. You can play any of the HeroQuest adventures using the advanced HeroQuest rules. Replace the HeroQuest rules for movement, combat, and magic with the advanced HeroQuest rules. Use the HeroQuest rules for placing monsters, searching, treasure cards, and so on. Whenever a hero is directed to lose a body point, he must lose 1 wound or 1 fate point instead. We have special rules for Sir Ragnar, Ulag, Grak. We increase the Chaos Warrior's toughness by 1 point in the Stone Hunter quest. We have stats for Balor and the Witch Lord. And we have the ability to use the HeroQuest board. So I say all of that to say that because they had control of the property and they were able to do it at the time, we have an advanced version of the game tacked on with a name that we know will have some selling power because of its presence 1 to 2 years earlier. This kind of points to the game being a pretty hot commodity, the original HeroQuest, in places in the world at the time. There was faith put into an advanced representation, and this isn't the only time Games Workshop has done this. They have an advanced Space Crusade for the Space Crusade line, and kind of like Advanced HeroQuest, it's modular, and it's very, very different from the standard Space Crusade or Star Quest, depending on where you're from. Instead of a myriad of Skaven, we get a myriad of Tyranids. That was way more difficult to say than I want to admit. But we get the Tyranids instead of the vast array of different monsters that are available in standard Space Crusade. Instead of getting our very generic and Warhammer 40k without ever saying Warhammer 40k versions of orcs, goblins, skeletons, which the Necrons are just robot skeletons in my opinion, and the other fantastic sculpts that come with Space Crusade, we get the Tyranids. So it pretty much gets the same treatment. Instead of the awesome board, which Space Crusade was already pretty modular in that it had several different boards that could be put together in a lot of different ways, you have much smaller rooms and corridors. I don't have Advanced Space Crusade, at least not yet, so I can't speak too intelligently about it. But it more or less looks like they gave it the exact same treatment as a sort of analog to Advanced HeroQuest, as that game was proposed as an advanced version to its predecessor. Standard HeroQuest would go on to be developed in the US. We got a few more expansions as late as 94. These expansions came out after Advanced HeroQuest, but they weren't for Advanced HeroQuest. They were for normal HeroQuest. But I say all of this to just kind of illustrate different perspectives and different reasons why you may or may not consider Advanced HeroQuest to really be its namesake. To me, it's not an Advanced HeroQuest. HeroQuest can be made advanced in many ways that stay much more true to its roots and to the intention of the game and its designer's vision and its contemporary IP holders' visions in ways that don't at all cross over into the territories that Advanced HeroQuest finds itself in, for better or for worse. Yet, Advanced HeroQuest is well liked by a large number of people. It has its communities. It has its people who find the grind of generating the dungeon and murdering Skaven and barely scraping by enough to afford to be able to eat and get to the next adventure just to kill more Skaven to be a rewarding experience. And I think that there's something important in that. It's a different experience. It's a different takeaway. It's a different tone and theme from HeroQuest, but it is a game in its own right with its own identity. And I think that a lot of the stuff translated very well into what would become Warhammer Quest, particularly the idea that there are advanced roleplay rules in that game, a beautiful thing that just has not been replicated since. The advanced and roleplay rules for Warhammer Quest are among the best design decisions I have seen made for a board game. And I just haven't seen the same thing since. I just wanted to throw that in there. We're not talking about that necessarily. I just wanted to throw that in there. So these are very different games. They have different purposes, and one is not really intended to replace the other. It's not intended to expand the other. It is intended to allow you to use the predecessor for elements in the game, but it invites you to use many other things as well. It invites you to play Warhammer. It invites you to buy Warhammer and to incorporate Warhammer into HeroQuest in ways that the original never did, never mentioned, never had. I'm not necessarily going into the whole is HeroQuest Warhammer argument. You know my thoughts on that, but it is pretty objective that Advanced HeroQuest is firmly set in the old world, that it invites all of these named monsters and has elements in it that are very, very old world compatible because they want you in the old world. I mean, the Chaos Gods are right there. The Skaven clans are right there. And yet HeroQuest endures on its own. So the second fundamental point that I want to talk about is copyright. IP, copyright, patents. These are things that are daunting. They are scary at first. If you don't have the right person explain things to you in a way that meshes well with your current understanding and the way that you learn things, it will continue to be something that is difficult to talk about because you think, well, they can't talk about copyright, IP, patents, and all that intelligently, so I will just not. And yet, talking about this stuff and raising awareness as to how simple, if at times very convoluted it can be, I think is a boon to the community, if you can pull it off. Now, there's no final word on copyright, trademark, IP. These things change hands. These things have rules depending on what territory you're in. Things get niche. There are not broad statements that accurately reflect every single copyright infraction or transfer, expiration, or creation since the dawn of time. But it is generally accepted, known, that you cannot copyright a specific set of rules. Rules themselves to a game simply cannot be copyrighted. But the expression of the rules, the authorship of writing them out, that would be something that is copyrighted. You can't copy someone's rules as they wrote them. You can explain the mechanics of the game that you are trying to create in your own words, even if those mechanics are the exact same as another game's mechanics. Things like art and lore and sculpts of things, those are all things that have authorship. Those things can have copyrights, even if they can have licenses so that a publisher is allowed to replicate those things, refer to them, use them over and over again, subject to a specific contract license surrounding their usage, specific language in those contracts, I mean. As far as the current holders of HeroQuest, we have seen the words and we have echoed the words, "We have everything." We might not actually know the scope of that, though. We Have Everything could absolutely, believably, and reasonably refer to what Milton Bradley had, what Hasbro had at the time of HeroQuest, and just HeroQuest. But Advanced HeroQuest has nothing to do with Hasbro. It has nothing to do with Milton Bradley, although it does allow you to bring elements from Milton Bradley's HeroQuest in. It is a Games Workshop creation. So HeroQuest itself is now something that is owned by Avalon Hill and Hasbro. The old game of HeroQuest is pretty much completely re-released, remastered. They have the rights to do that. They can do that. They have done it. In fact, everything published almost at this point has been remade in some way and has been made available to the public through retail outlets. But Advanced HeroQuest, I would say, is in a state of limbo. I think that the HeroQuest name would not be able to be used by a Games Workshop, even if they were to entertain such an idea, and I don't think they would in the next 100 years. The concepts and design and everything else about Advanced HeroQuest could absolutely be done by Games Workshop, but they're already doing that with different versions and forms of Warhammer Quest. I know, the most recent entry in the series, Warhammer Quest Darkwater, it shares absolutely no parallels with Advanced HeroQuest. But we're looking at more of an evolution, a very, very long and very active evolution of a series of concepts that have been adapted with different designers coming on board and giving their interpretation and their perspective and then going off board and other people replacing them. Over time, this DNA has completely changed in its evolution. But the underlying concepts could 100% be done, again, by Games Workshop or by Avalon Hill or by Ravensburger or by Pegasus Spiel. Fantasy Flight could come out of nowhere and do it. Anybody could make a game like Advanced HeroQuest using that rule set. You'd have to give everything that has copyright away. You'd have to absolutely remove all of that. You couldn't have Skaven in your Advanced HeroQuest. You couldn't have the specific artwork that was used to create the tiles. You couldn't have the text that was used to explain the game's mechanics. So you couldn't have the lore that's in the Advanced HeroQuest book. Effectively, you would be removing the theme, which I would argue was like 90% of the game to begin with. How much fun, how much reward are you going to get playing Advanced HeroQuest if you're not really playing HeroQuests set in the Warhammer world with Skaven and all thousands of dollars worth of the miniatures that they want you to buy in order to play it? Look, I don't know how much the miniatures were back then. I'm sure they weren't that much money. In fact, I got the Orc Warlord from the Lair of the Orc Lord Warhammer Quest expansion in a blister pack for like $3. $3. That guy's like, I don't know, $40 now, secondhand on eBay, which is normal. That's to be expected. But I mean, there's so many other sculpts in that set of pages that are so much harder to get. They're so much more expensive. The Lord of Change, forget about it. A mummy, a zombie, I can proxy that. That's no problem. But like every Lord of Change is like $150 to $300. Every Lord of Change. But the point is, if you have to strip away all that theming, then what's the point of recreating the game just by its rule set? You'd even have to remove the HeroQuest from the name. So you'd have like Advanced, Quest for Heroes or some kind of generic crap like that. Anybody could do it though. Anybody could recreate the game. They could recreate the components, the stats, all of that stuff. Mechanically, you can play Advanced HeroQuest. You could make this and distribute it yourself. Mechanically, the exact same game, the exact same experience, sans the theming. Okay, so Games Workshop would be able to do this and keep it set in the old world and be able to include the Skaven and be able to include a pretty generic group of... They could include what do they call those elves? Way Watchers? For the Wood Elf, they could have a Barbarian. They could have a Dwarf. They could call him, an Orc Slayer or something. And they could have a Wizard. They could be the Bright Wizard. They can do that. That's not going to encroach on HeroQuest territory. It is something that Games Workshop has been doing forever. The 4 or 5 protagonists from Vermintide all fit these descriptions perfectly. They could just as easily create a game with different versions of these heroes and put them in there. Games Workshop could remaster and re-release Advanced HeroQuest just under a different name and without any association to HeroQuest. And it would be easy to do because Advanced HeroQuest has almost no association whatsoever with HeroQuest as a property. I know that sounds absolutely insane, but it just doesn't. It's got 3 pages and a little bit of blurb on the back of the box in text letting you know that you can use your HeroQuest game system components optionally. But that's very easy to remove because the game is a game in its own right. It really just has nothing to do with HeroQuest. So you would be able to create this game, and Games Workshop could create this game. Maybe they could make a deal with Hasbro, and I really don't see why they wouldn't have the ability to do it, to just use the name. But again, it would be like there's no thing that links these two games, and now HeroQuest is objectively set in a completely different realm, completely different world. It has nothing to do with the old world. It has nothing to do with chaos whatsoever. So it would be very bizarre to see that happen. Could happen, but the chances of it are very, very low. They're not zero, but they're just extremely low. You'd have to see handshakes happen. And they are also very low, if quite a bit higher than the HeroQuest handshake with Avalon Hill. Also low that Games Workshop would recreate a version of Advanced HeroQuest today. And in fact, and I don't think anybody would disagree with this, I'd much rather them recreate Warhammer Quest 1995 in its entirety. I would much rather them remaster and remake and sell that game. Okay, so let's move on to Avalon Hill's ability to recreate Advanced HeroQuest, which is the crux of all of this. Because you cannot copyright the rule set, and because the mechanisms are all there, and because of the points I just made earlier about any game company being able to do this, technically, yes, of course, obviously, Avalon Hill could create Advanced HeroQuest. I don't think they would be able to name it Advanced HeroQuest. You can look up Games Workshop's trademarks, what they still hold trademark to in terms of Advanced HeroQuest. A lot of those trademarks are considered abandoned, but they still have a number of them that they hold. So could they transfer those? Yeah. Could they go ahead and cancel them? Yeah. Could they abandon them? Yeah. They're not doing them any justice or service now. The question is, would they go through the administrative effort? I don't know. It seems like something that would be so easy. And there might be just a little bit more red tape to it than we realize. We might be oversimplifying things by saying simply yes or simply no. But I think it could happen if they put in the administrative effort. They could, and this would again be a handshake between Games Workshop and Avalon Hill. They could say, yeah, you can say Advanced HeroQuest, and that's it. Now, we've got Skaven, and we have the Old World, and we have a lot of mention to Warhammer's Old World and its lore, which I would repeat is a big part of Advanced HeroQuest's appeal, is its setting and the bleakness of its dungeon crawl, because you understand the setting, because you understand the environment in which it is set and the lore around that. It doesn't hit the same thinking about this being set in the world of contemporary HeroQuest. Yes, there's dread. Yes, there's the jungles of Delthrak and the frozen northern wastes. And yes, there are the towers in which the Wizards of Morcar expansion takes place, but all of that is still less bleak than the encroaching, unstoppable promise of the bad end that chaos provides to the old world. So I would say, yeah, it's possible, but it would have to be a handshake just for the title alone. And if we're talking about adding the other elements, there's no reason why Avalon Hill would do that. There's much more reason why Games Workshop would do it. It's possible for them to just license it out. Avalon Hill did license Talisman from Games Workshop, and they have created a pretty cool version of Talisman. It is a Games Workshop property, but it was licensed out so that Avalon Hill could make a 5th edition of the game. We know that Avalon Hill and Games Workshop can shake hands in this way. They've done it before. They have proven that to us. It's demonstrably correct. But would it be a little bit too much to ask for Games Workshop to go back through their archives of a game that hasn't been in service for 25 years? I don't know, because it doesn't seem like they're revisiting any of their older properties. It doesn't seem like they're interested in bringing anything back, per se. We've got a new The Old World, I think, edition, and I mean editions of Warhammer Fantasy Battles. That's one thing. Classic Warhammer, get it on the table, build a 6,000 point army and play for 3 weeks against your buddy. That's one thing. I'm not talking about that. Games Workshop isn't known for bringing back stuff. In fact, they're more known for erasing stuff. They come out with a new season of Warhammer Underworlds, and suddenly almost everything that you own is going to be invalid for tournament play. That sounds a lot more like Games Workshop. But just to answer my own fundamental questions, I just don't see why either company would necessarily revisit Advanced HeroQuest. As much as we might like to see it, and as much as the number might actually be there, it would be very difficult, I think, to jump through those hoops and to get to that point where they could offer it. I don't see why they would do it, not because I don't think that the game is worthy of reproducing, but that the game itself, from its inception, and because of what it was when it was new and when it was released, is already a bit of an oddity. Why would Avalon Hill make a Games Workshop game? One that's not just like a licensed property like, oh, Talisman, you can set that anywhere. Talisman's not set in the old world. Talisman 5th edition's not. Talisman 4th edition's not. Our Talisman 3rd edition, that's got old world references everywhere. You've got Chaos Dwarf, you've got Bright Wizard. That sucker is a lovely little Warhammer immersion game for sure. What are talismans in the world of Warhammer? I don't know. But if you want to play a Warhammer, an old Hammer-esque game, but not play Warhammer Fantasy Battles, play Talisman. Unless you have Advanced HeroQuest, then you're playing a board game firmly set in the old world, canonically, officially. But play Talisman anyway. Why would Avalon Hill do it when Games Workshop could do it? But why would Games Workshop bother to do it when they have so many other things that they could do that would make more sense, like Warhammer Quest 95? And I guess that's really the crux of my answer. Why would either of these companies do something that doesn't make a lot of sense? Would it sell? I don't know. Could you call it Advanced HeroQuest? That would be a lie. It wasn't entirely accurate back then, but HeroQuest is a totally different beast now. Why would Games Workshop want to take something of Avalon Hill's and say, here's the advanced version of it? Why would Avalon Hill want to take their HeroQuest name and put it on a new game that's standalone that has nothing to do with the actual game just to confuse its fans? And so I will propose what I think would be the most likely thing to happen. Although I think that this is another why would they do it, because it wouldn't be what anybody would necessarily be asking for. I think people want an advanced version of the existing HeroQuest game to exist in a fashion that gives them a complete role-play rulebook, and 100% is tied to the board game as it stands today. Something that does what Advanced HeroQuest back then is named to do, but doesn't actually do. Whereas, hold on, I'm going to shill a book real quick. Something like the Quest Builder's Handbook from Spectrum Games 100% takes this idea of expanding this game that exists and the elements that are in it outwards to make it more role-play friendly, to make it more advanced. This is the direction that we would want to see HeroQuest go in. And if Avalon Hill made a game called Advanced HeroQuest, I think it would be something a lot more dedicated to that concept. I think it would do things with HeroQuest itself that were not done when Advanced HeroQuest was released by Games Workshop as a successor to HeroQuest. I think that Avalon Hill would do right by their own property, and they would be in a position to do things much better, and they would be able to pull things and use them with a lot more liberty than Games Workshop was able to do with the HeroQuest. Well, I don't think that they were necessarily restricted in any way, but it was still a different game. It was still a different game, and I don't have Terror in the Dark. I really don't think Terror in the Dark provided you with any rules to bring old HeroQuest components out, though. I think it was just an Advanced HeroQuest expand. You'll have to let me know if that's wrong, if it did have even more reverence to the original HeroQuest. But I guess at the end of the day, I would say that if Avalon Hill were to make Advanced HeroQuest, it would be a different monster than 1990 Advanced HeroQuest. And that's because they would be paying proper tribute. They would be really leaning into the concepts of expansion on a game that exists today, rather than trying to sell you a completely separate game and all of its components. If Avalon Hill made an Advanced HeroQuest and they were truly traveling the path of Games Workshop in 1990, it would be like if they added in stats for Betrayal at House on the Hill. And then they were like, you can use your HeroQuest game system, but you're basically gonna play Betrayal at House on the Hill. And for more Betrayal at House on the Hill, here's a list of monsters that are from the Betrayal at House on the Hill franchise that you could use if you go out and buy those components for Advanced HeroQuest. But I guess the real question is, would anybody be able to do what the fans are actually talking about? And the fans are actually talking about taking Advanced HeroQuest as it was and reprinting it for today and saying, here's a re-release. Here it is again, as it was presented back then, perhaps with new tiles, new doors that swing open, new this, new that. It's accessible. It's on the shelves again. I think the likelihood of that is just so super low based on the handshakes and then the sitting down at the table, which would be very awkward. And it would be like, why should we actually do this when you are in a better position to do it? And the other team says, well, why would we do it when you're in a better position to do it in your own way? It's tangled knots, but as I said at the beginning of all this, I'm not the final word on anything. I'm just saying that's kind of how I view all of this situation. It's not even really a situation, just something people are asking about. And I think that these are things that we could use, pieces of information to think on when we think about how to ask anybody if an Advanced HeroQuest system is doable today. Would we ever see Advanced HeroQuest on the shelf? I think no. I think my short answer, my speculation is that we're not going to see Advanced HeroQuest ever again. I don't think Games Workshop is going to do it. I don't think Avalon Hill is going to do it. I don't think anybody is going to give us a new Advanced HeroQuest, and I don't think that we're going to get an Advanced HeroQuest re-release of any kind. I do think it's entirely possible that Avalon Hill make an advanced version rule set for HeroQuest because they can totally do that, but I don't think that any part of that would resemble what we're calling Advanced HeroQuest. I just think it would be more like the Quest Builder's Handbook, where we build out concepts that are related to the actual game on which it's based. I think it would be a true expansion to the game system as it is today, rather than a separate board game trying to sell you other stuff. That's my take, and that is all I have to say in this exceedingly long broadcast. So I hope that you have stayed awake for the duration of this. You'll have to let me know. Make sure you comment about goats in the comments below if you did. And I thank you very much for your kind attention. Thanks so much for all your support, all your comments, all the discussion. Debate me down below if you think that I needed to be gently guided towards a different path at any point in this video. I'd love to hear your thoughts, no matter what they are. Good, bad, ugly, share them. And I'll see you in the next exciting adventure. Until then, brave heroes, I bid you farewell for now.